be able to smile always. Such a subject means that we must start this service with a smile. We must not be glum. As Master's Guru used to say, that religion is not a funeral procession. And so I always start this particular talk with a little story. In this world there seems to be two types of people, and sometimes a third, but especially optimists and then the pessimists. The optimists, of course, are those who are always looking on the bright side of life and at least trying to make the best of it. And so this little story I tell is about the optimist who fell 10 stories and at each window bar shouted, "All right, so far." So that's the optimist. And he must have been optimistic. And on the other hand, we have the pessimists. You all know about them. And these pessimists, well, there used to be a little saying that the pessimists, we live in hope and die in despair. I used to say to Master, he used to say, "Hitch your chariot to a star." And I'd end it by saying, and he didn't like it, I'd say, "And then when you fall just so far." But he didn't like that very much. And he used to get quite cross. But there are other people in the world who are kind of in between. They're trying to beat the game, so to speak. And this little episode comes to my mind about a certain man of a very thrifty nature. Very thrifty nature. And he used to take great long steps as he walked, to save on his shoes. But to his dismay, he found, and in so doing, taking the long steps, he split his pants. So, economy is great stuff. But be sure when you're practicing economy, it isn't false economy. So, as you think of this little story from time to time, I would advise you to try it, because I doubt if it'll be economical, but it'll help you to smile when things are not going just as they should. And so, one can smile under all conditions. This is the thing we have to learn. One can smile under all conditions like the optimist, but that is done by will and determination. You can do that by will and determination. But sometimes I think we'll feel ourselves hypocrites if we do it that way. I was just thinking, if you look about you in this material creation and this material world and see what's going on, that sometimes it's very difficult to smile. And yet you can do it. You can do it if you have the smile of the wisdom of the soul. Smile of the soul through wisdom, you can do it. But in other times, as we look around and we see the paradoxes and injustices of this material creation and this world in which we find ourselves, that it is difficult, even by will and determination, to smile. A few things that come to my mind about what has just happened in Chicago, where those little children were destroyed in that terrific fire through, it seems, no fault of their own. Unless we have soul knowledge, we cannot understand those things. And then again, we see children, some born healthy, some with weak and broken bodies, who go through life that way. It's very difficult to smile. But there is a way to smile. And as we look about us, I understand in China and in India, there is so much want there that the little children are crawling up, eating out of the garbage pail. It's difficult to smile. But when you know the soul, and then by knowing the soul, which is a ray of God, know the presence of God within and understand just what this material creation is, then you can smile, because you know in the ultimate this creation is simply a dream of God, And when you break the dream, there is no suffering. Only then can we smile. The smile of the soul, which comes through wisdom. Also, the uncertainties of life bother us. We realize these things, these accidents which happen. All the time we read about terrific accidents, and there seems to be no justice in these things. And then the loss of fortunes, and then world conditions. World conditions are so hard to justify, where we read about the massacres in the different countries of innocent people, and of the prison camps, and also after the last war of bands of little children roaming around without parents. It's very difficult to smile. But there is a way. And if you turn your attention inward to the presence of God, you can smile, because that's the nature of the soul. The soul is naturally buoyant because why? God is bliss. And we as souls are rays of God, rays of spirit. Having that, then we can understand this dream. And we'll understand the paradoxes, and then we can smile under any and every condition, but only when we know our oneness with God and remove the idea that we are separated from Him. And so, to be permanently happy, not just to be happy through the exercise of will and determination sporadically, but to be permanently happy, we have to know the soul. And the soul is naturally, that's his nature. The soul is naturally buoyant and happy because God is bliss, God is peace, God is joy, and we as souls are rays of Him, rays of His Spirit, atoms of the great ocean of God's presence. So knowing that, we can smile at all times. And so, realize true and permanent peace and bliss. Sometimes in this life we receive something and we feel buoyed up, but it isn't permanent. It passes away when the desire is replaced by another desire, and fulfillment is necessary through another object of sense. That passes away. But when you have contact with the presence of God and know the soul, then it is permanent. As Patanjali says, the goal of life is to escape suffering permanently. Not just for this week, next week, or next year, eternally. And so to smile, to be able to smile at all times, we must know that permanent presence of God within us, the soul consciousness, which is a part of His great blissful consciousness. And we can do it by removing the idea that we are separated from Him. And we'll come to how to do that in just a minute. Realize the soul is ever-conscious, blissful, eternal existence because it is one with God. That's what God is. That's Master's definition of God, God the Father. Ever-conscious, blissful, eternal existence. We don't want to exist eternally without being conscious of it. And yet we want to exist not just next week or a year, but eternally. And that existence must be conscious and blissful. Otherwise, it's of no use. We should realize that. And so the soul is blissful. Youth is optimistic. Why? Because as the young person comes into this existence, it is fresh from contact with the soul and God on the other side of existence. It retains that blissful nature because God is bliss. And so as it starts out in this earthly life, it is full of spirit and buoyancy until it becomes attached to this earthly existence with these paradoxes and injustices of which I have spoken. And then, if they're not careful, they become down in the mouth, and you know what happens in this world existence. But if we retain our remembrance of our oneness with God, if we can in youth start meditating every day, retaining the contact of the presence of God within, of which Brother Lawrence spoke, if we can do that, we will not lose that buoyancy. And finally, not only we will not lose it, we will make it permanent within us by our great love and affection for God. This comes not by outward consciousness, mind, senses, and intellect, but by the intuition of the soul, the sixth sense, the intuition of the soul. So let us understand these few simple things this morning and put them into practice, and we will be able to smile under every condition. Now, most people try to find happiness in countless wrong ways, in outer circumstances. They try to find happiness in many ways, as you know. Like the story which the Master used to tell of the man who he wanted money. He knew if he had money, he'd be happy and he'd be able to smile all the time. But having all the money, then he got indigestion. And he found that there was something else necessary that he might smile all the time. So then, as the story goes, he found he needed a wife to be able to smile and be happy. So he got the wife. But the sad part of it was that she turned out to be a nagging wife. And his happiness evaporated, and the smile faded, and it ended in divorce. So then he got thinking, well, somehow I've got to be happy. And finally he found, after years, a devoted lady. And so he married her. Everything was fine until she up and died. So then he decided that to be happy, he was old then, decrepit. He decided that to be happy he had to once more be youthful, retain his youth. And so you see, there's no end to it. There's no end to it. You get one thing, you want another. Yet the simple way is to go beyond that and get contact with the one eternal Father. The soul is blissful, peaceful. Then when these other things come, which they will in outward existence, we can supersede them by feeling our oneness with the presence of God. I think Master has a reference I'd like to give you at this time from his autobiography. He says, how quickly we weary of earthly pleasures. Desire for material things is endless. Man is never satisfied completely and pursues one goal after another. There's something else he seeks. Something else he seeks is the Lord, who alone can grant lasting joy. So that's something else which you are seeking. The desire comes for a new hat or a new automobile, whatever it is. And you'll get it. But that something else you are seeking is not the hat. It is not the automobile. It is not the house. It is not a new wife, as the gentleman thought he had to have. It is the presence of God within. As Brother Lawrence so wonderfully speaks of. That's the something else we need. It is not known, as I have said, through following outward consciousness. It is simply known, or known easily, by regular meditation every day, giving a little time to him who gives us everything. The Master used to say, surely God is worth 1 hour out of the 24. Do we give him that time? I know some of you do here. Those of you who don't, give him that time. And then you will be able to smile under all adverse conditions. Now, living in outward consciousness through the impact of desires upon us confines us to the three lower centers of the spine. These three lower centers here. As most people live there, in outward consciousness. And with that comes lack of fulfillment. Because in this material existence, there is no satisfaction. I mean permanent satisfaction, of which I spoke in the beginning. There is no fulfillment, no permanent satisfaction, because permanent satisfaction is natural to the soul, not in outward living. But when, by meditation and following the techniques of yoga, the science of yoga, the right technique, You elevate the frequency of your consciousness. So instead of vibrating in the lower three centers of the spine, it vibrates in the upper centers of the spine from the heart center up to the supreme center in the brain. Then you will live in an entirely different consciousness. And what will that consciousness be? Soul consciousness. And souls, remember, are rays of God. And then your state of consciousness will be entirely different. It will not be attached to this outward living with its insufficiency and lack of fulfillment, but it will be attached to the soul or the presence of God within. And whatever comes, no one will be able to shake you from that realization that you are one with God. And so you see, by following the practice of yoga, which means union with God, that's all, by following this ancient science handed down from India ages ago, by following that, you will know the presence of God within. Having that, you will be permanently happy. Being permanently happy, no one can eradicate the smile of wisdom of your soul. That's the way to be able to smile all the time, is to go to the fountainhead, whereby you'll be able to know your oneness with God and know there's no separation between you and his great love. And by simple affection, God will flow through you. God, who has made billions of universes, billions. We worry about him taking care of us. We try to interfere with him. We can do nothing. Not make one cell of the body, as Jesus said. But when he allows us to realize our oneness with him through the affection we have for him, then life is entirely different. We realize God alone is, nothing else. That's why all the saints in the end say, God alone. God alone is the one reality. And so under these conditions, no trouble or undesirable circumstance can shake that peace of the soul. That's what the world needs. That's what each one of us needs. Nothing else. I have another reference from the autobiography in which Master so wonderfully points these things out. He says, human life is beset with sorrow until we know how to tune in with the divine will, whose right course is often baffling to the egotistic intelligence. You cannot know God through the intellect. That's why it's baffling. Then he goes on to say, God bears the burden of the cosmos, billions of universes. He alone can give us unerring counsel. And so you see how wonderfully the Master points out a simple truth. We should more depend on God. The more we depend on ourselves, the more we mess things up. But if we just depend on God and do our best, he who runs universes can run us. I remember one thing, God is the sole doer. Master used to tell me in the last war when Hitler was about to attack England. If he had kept on, he could have finished England off. No question about it. Master said to me, who put the thought in Hitler's brain to attack Russia? And later he told about how other two, the Allies and England, were the tiger, the lion and the tiger, and the fox came. And after the lion and the tiger had beat each other up and were reduced to impotency, then the fox came in and took the spoil. That's just what happened. But the point is God is the doer, and he can put in your brain or my brain or anybody's brain, through his omniscient consciousness, what we should do or what we should not do. Such is the power of the infinite Father. And so, therefore, the secret is this. If you want to be able to smile always, meditate, and through the practice of the science of yoga, realize your oneness with God. Realize that he is the doer, and that you are a part of him. Your consciousness, where does it come from? Where does my consciousness come from? It doesn't come out of the thin air. It comes from the Father. There's only one consciousness in all these universes, and that's God's consciousness. It's in you. It's in me. It's in all people. It's in all things, but there seems to be a separation. That's the delusion. Now, the practice of yoga, the science of yoga, will help you through meditation to break that idea that you are separated from God. And when you break that idea, then you'll realize what you are. That you are one with God, and God is bliss, as I have said, ever-conscious, blissful, eternal existence. Knowing that, feeling that, how can you be downhearted? How can you help but smile under all conditions? This is the secret of the whole thing. Meditate regularly. Practice the science of yoga, which means union with the one eternal Father. Having that, then you will be able to smile under all conditions. You will know that God is with you, and if you know the one eternal Father who was made, this whole creation is with you, won't you be able to smile when you fear anything? No. That's why the saints are so fearless and smiling, because they have that realization of the security and presence of God which is behind them. Sometimes they have an external countenance which seems severe, like Master Sir Chesterfield, but underneath that is the humbleness and the peace and the bliss of a child, because God is bliss. God is the most humble. He never says a word. All this thing He has created, all the things we do, He never says a word about it. Master expresses it very nicely in this final reference. Ever new joy is God. He is inexhaustible. And as you continue your meditations during the year, He will beguile you with an infinite ingenuity. Such is God. He is worth having. And if we follow Him, as the Master told me, and I think it applies to each and every one of us, so I will tell you, let your life be a spiritual example for others to follow. To our one home of life, our cosmic home of life, the eternal presence of God, His great consciousness, plus His energy. From that all things have come. That's what God is. And that's what we are. If we expand our consciousness from this limited body to the great ocean of God's presence. Let us follow what the Master said. Let our lives be a spiritual example for others to follow. That we all meet in our one cosmic home of life. And all of us will meet there, will live and do right.